Cool.
Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. We typically start these sessions by going around the room so we know who's in the room. So everybody, just please introduce yourself. If you work here at Berkeley, let us know, and then let us know what you're doing in Drupal. So I'll go ahead and start. My name's Kathleen Liu. I work here in Central IT along with our team who is presenting today, and we do lots and lots of things in Drupal.
I'm Caroline Boyden. I work, again, centralized IT. I do Drupal and web accessibility.
I'm Brian Wood, and I work in centralized IT, and I do same stuff that these guys do, and also a lot of automation and scripting and things. So you'll see my hacky methods.
I'm Anna Gastowitz. I also work with these guys in IT. I work on IST Drupal as well as web accessibility.
Raj Kotlin, I work in the history department on our Drupal platform.
I'm Drew Mason. I work for Simon's Institute for the Theory of Computing, and I take care of our website, which is Drupal-based.
I'm Dan Montoya. I work for the Team 2 URSO up in the engineering department. We're transferring our site over to Drupal, so here to learn as much as I can.
I used to work up at LVL. I'm now working on a project for plant tissue culture and using Drupal for an application that helps with quality.
I'm Karen Pardo. I work in the computer science department and the engineering dean's office. In the dean's office, we have a current Drupal site, and yes, it looks like we will be building one in the next year or two.
I'm Brian Miller. I work with Equity and Inclusion, and I manage a number of Drupal websites.
I'm Julie Lefebvre. I work at the Institute of Government Studies, and I work on
I'm Monza, working in library business services, and working on student job and travel requests.
And we had one more person join us.
Oh, I'm
Introduce yourself.
Ryder Mouse. I have a Git Pantheon site that I'm trying to figure out how to use Drush with.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and get started. Some of this may be, the earlier parts probably be familiar to some of you who've used Drush before, but then there are other people, and I know folks who have used Drupal for years and years and years, and it's on your list to get around to using Drush, but you never get to it. So if you do any kind of site maintenance, i.e. you're the person responsible for updating Drupal core, any contributed modules, certainly if you actually write your own and support your own custom modules, Drush is your friend. You should definitely be using Drush, and it's not hard to get started. And so what we wanted to do is really kind of take you through the whole cycle, getting started with Drush, where to find documentation, and then the team will walk us through some basic commands and then some more specific commands on Pantheon if you happen to host your Drupal site there, and then some fun scripting that Brian will be showing you. So Drush stands for the Drupal shell. Early on some people called it Drush, but now most people are calling it Drush. It's a command line and scripting interface for Drupal, so if you haven't used a command line before, you don't need to be a Unix pro and you don't need to know everything. You can actually, get around using Drush without tons of command line experience. And again, once you get started, it's pretty straightforward. And there are various commands that can do a whole range of tasks. So you can manage and maintain your Drupal sites, and some people just use really basic stuff. So in terms of just updating, it's really easy to update using Drush. But again, there's a lot of power. And then people who write custom modules have the ability to then add their own Drush commands that you can run. So if you're using a specific module, sometimes you can actually tell the developer, hey, would you mind putting this in a Drush command? Because again, once you start using Drush, we pretty much never go into the interface if we can run it on the command line. It's just that much faster, and then you can actually script it and set things off and go get a cup of coffee and come back and hope things are all right with the world. So getting started, what's required to use Drush? Basically, you need a computer with a Unix shell because you're going to be running a bunch of shell commands. So on the Mac comes with terminal, so you're already ready to go. We prefer iTerm 2, which is just a little better terminal, and you can get that for free at iterm2.com. If you're using Unix, I assume that you know how to launch and use your favorite shell. Windows is always the harder one. I haven't done Windows in a while, but the last time I was using Drush, I did use the Git Bash shell. So here's a link, and we'll share these slides on the Drupal Berkeley page, but Git Bash will be your easiest way to get set up, and then your commands will be the same as everybody else running a Bash shell. So Drupal basics. Where Drush documentation now is all on GitHub. So if you go to the GitHub page, which I will go to right now, you'll see a GitHub link. And if you haven't used GitHub before, again, you don't need to get all into Git and be intimidated by it. What you'll be looking for is if you wanted to git clone, just like any other GitHub page, your git clone URL will be over here. But if you don't want anything to do with Git right now, you could also hit this download zip file, and that'll just download, archive everything, and you can just unzip it like anything else, and you don't have to be set up in Drush. In Git. As with most GitHub pages, there is a README, and what I'm going to be pointing out here is there's a link to general documentation. That's pretty much now everything you need to know about Drush, and it's pretty comprehensive now. Back in the day, a lot of it was kind of figure out and maybe see if somebody else has some tips for you. But now there's a lot of documentation. And then there's this new site as well called Drush Commands, which can be really helpful for just trying to guess. There's got to be a command for this, and you can look it up and hopefully find it. So we'll start with the Drush documentations. So when you launch Drush documentations, I can make this a little bigger. You'll see here there's a general page that'll just describe the same thing. And then on the left, you'll see a bunch of menu items. So you can start with install. And install will just show that there are a number of Drush versions. So there is a 5, 6, 7 version. Really depends on where you're hosting your site. I believe Pantheon is still on 5.10. So sometimes you might, if you're using Git check out different branches. So you can actually check out a version 5, a version 6, and then if you want to be on the bleeding edge, you can check out a version 7. And so that's up to you. Again, if you don't want to use Git, you can always just download the package as an archive and unzip it. Composer we'll be getting into. If you start using some more advanced things, you'll want to install Composer as well, and there's information on that. But for getting started with Drush, you really just need to pick the version and make sure you unarchive that code. And then there's some basic things to get started. This page will have, again, tips. It'll talk about how to get cloned. So depending on your system, you might need to change permissions by the to give yourself access to run the executable. Some people will want to create a symbolic link, so you can type Drush from anywhere and it'll find the right path. And then, as with most things, you might want to export that path in your bash aliases or your bash RC file and just make sure you're all set up to run. Again, this is kind of more, if you're using it day-to-day, you want to take the time to do this, but very basically, you can download the archive, unpack it, and run it right from that directory, and everything should work. So this is, again, a good detailed page that'll get into all those details on installing. Besides here, again, if you want to get into here, there's lots of stuff on specifically configuring. There's some example files, so once you actually start setting up some scripts and some configuration files, you can use some of these as examples. There's examples in terms of details on aliases. If you want to run a make file, which we won't be getting as much into, there's some stuff on Drush make. But again, as you're getting started, you really can just stop at this install page and then start testing out the basic commands that Anna will be showing you shortly. Once you start using it, you'll realize how simple it is, and you'll wonder how you possibly ever got through life on a Drupal site without Drush. And then little by little, you'll start thinking there's got to be a Drush command for that. So toward that end, there's a site, Drush commands, and this is again from that main GitHub page. And the nice thing about this is you can toggle here if you want Drush 6 commands or Drush 7 commands. Right now I'm using Drush 6 a lot, so I might say there's got to be a way to enable a module really quickly in Drush, but I forgot what it's called. So I can just come in here and start typing enable, and voila, there's something called PM enable. So then if I click on this, this will tell me everything I need to know. The full command is Drush PM enable, but I can just type Drush en. So if I want to enable a module, all I'll need to do is know the module name, views, and then use Drush en and your site alias, and that will enable the site for you. And so again, it gets very straightforward with this searching command, because you can, like I said, take a educated guess and likely find the Drush command that will help you. Let's proceed. So Drush aliases. Typically when you want to run a Drush command, especially if you're maintaining more than one site, you'll want to set up your Drush aliases. So if you're doing it locally, if you have a local stack, we use Acquia Drupal has Dev Desktop, which is a one-click, and it'll set up a local stack on your computer. Otherwise, you can use MAMP or WAMP or XAMP or whatever your stack is. But then you'll want to set up some aliases so you can just call your Drush commands on whatever site you want. So in your .drush directory is usually what gets set up automatically for you. You'll create a file called aliases.drushrc.php, and pretty much for every site that you want, you just want to call, you want to set up the alias so that if my site name was web access, I would put web access where example is in all 3 places, assuming that I set up my URI. So if I go to my browser and type in webaccess.localhost, you've already set that up, so that would launch your local site. And then you'll want to pass in the full path on your specific local drive for where that site is located. Those lines are all you really need for each site, and then every time you spin up a new site, you just add that to the same Drush RC file. We're going to be getting into using Drush on Pantheon. The neat thing about Pantheon is they've done this for you for every Pantheon site. So all you need to do is when you log in, you will see a button that says Download Drush Aliases. If you just hit that, you can save that to your .drush folder. On the Mac, by default, you might have hidden files hidden. You can hit Shift Command period, and that'll show your hidden files. You can save it there, or you can save it anywhere and move it into that folder. Once you've done that, if you do a Drush SA, that will show all the site aliases, and then you will be good to go. So here, if I wanted, for example, then to do a ST is short for status, which, again, if we go to here, I can say status. And
Is there an internet password?
you now can go to the Cal Visitor.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think Cal Visitor should be. So if I type Drush at, and this is an alias for a site on Anna's computer, status will then quickly output all of the status of this site. So it'll tell me that this is a Drupal 7.34 site. The site URI is drush-bdug.localhost, and it'll tell you a bunch of stuff in terms of it's using a default theme of Bardic, etc., what version of Drush. And so this will output the same thing if you look at a site on Pantheon, and it'll give you the whole information. So sometimes when you're not able to connect to Pantheon, you might just check status and see if there's something wrong with Pantheon, it's down, or maybe your connection is not good. Moving forward, I'm going to switch this over to Anna, and she'll show you some very basic Drush commands that you can run for basic maintenance. Thanks, Anna.
Okay, so I wanted to piggyback really quick on what Kathleen was saying about sort of Drush being super easy once you get it set up, and it kind of changing your life as far as site maintenance, because just for me personally, I work more on the operations side of what our team does, and when I started at this job maybe a little over a year ago, I hardly had ever touched the command line, and now I use it pretty much every day, and it's super easy. So I guess my message is if you don't feel all that comfortable sort of delving into this world, it's not nearly as hard as you might think it is. So, and I'll go into some of the really easy basic stuff now that will really save you a lot of time, because the commands here, really what they do is replace however many clicks it takes you to run these same commands using the UI of your site, which, as you've probably done before, it takes several clicks to get down to the right level and then wait as it runs and so on and so forth. So I also wanted to note, if I go back to my terminal window, the important part about the Drush status that I've always made sure to look for was this database and Drupal bootstrap messages. If they say connected and successful, like for me, that usually means that I'm all set to start running Drush. Times for whatever reason, I forgot to update my aliases or something along those lines, and I got some sort of Drush error. If I went and ran a status, it would just say nothing for Drupal bootstrap. So sort of your first tip that something's not right. So go back to my slides here. So these are the commands I probably run the most often as someone that's generally doing all these maintenance tasks for all these sites. Running update PHP, Drush at my site alias, updb, super easy to remember. Same with running cron, it just is Drush site alias plus cron. If you want to clear caches at any point, it doesn't have to be when you're running any kind of other maintenance tasks, it's just cc all. For core and contributed modules, if you would like to download, enable, disable, and update, these are all available for you to do. For updating in particular, what's nice is you can either, depending on if you need to update to a certain version of a module, if you're not ready to go all the way up to whatever version is available, you can do that as well. And before if you ran, Drush site alias up whatever the module name, it'll bring up a message basically saying, are you sure you want to update it? And you say yes or no. So all the stuff is built in for you not to screw it up, basically. So let me do a quick demo then. So before this session, I spun up a basic Drupal 7 site on Pantheon, and I'm running it locally, as Kathleen mentioned, via Acquia Dev Desktop. And if I was just creating a new site for whoever, I was creating my own site, so on and so forth, probably one of the first things I would do is start downloading modules, because these are, right now, it's just whatever core ones are enabled out of fresh installation. So let's say if I go to my command line that I want to start by downloading views, which is probably a module that you want to use. So I can either start typing Drush at whatever my site alias name is, which is Drush BDUG, or if I've run this before, just like a command or so ago, all I have to do is hit the up arrow. It'll bring the last thing that Kathleen typed into my terminal window, and I can just hit the back button, which will save you time moving forward, especially if you're running lots of these commands. So in this case, I want to download views to start. So I'm going to hit DL views, which I know is the module, hit enter. And hey, it downloaded it. It's so easy. So now that I've downloaded it, I'm going to want to enable it, right? So I'm going to hit the up arrow, hit my back button a few times. I'm going to say enable, which is N, and then views. It's going to ask me, oh, and so this is what's cool too. So views is dependent on CTools, and so it's going to ask me, do you want to download CTools? And in this case, I absolutely do. So I'm going to start by hitting yes. It's going to download, and now it's told me everything that it's downloaded. It's saying that the following extensions will then be enabled, both views, which is what I had requested the first time. It's also going to enable CTools since I need that to run views as well. So let's hit yes. It's going to do its magic, and now I've got all this stuff set up, and I didn't even have to go to that giant modules page and search for it and click the buttons and so on and so forth. So very, very easy. And now, since I've just enabled modules, it's probably a good idea to run update PHP. So I will hit my up arrow once again, and I'm going to say up DB. And if there were database updates required, which is usually more common if you're updating a module that's out of date, then it'll just run it there without you having to do any extra prompting. Any questions thus far? Yeah.
When I said ask for the required CTools,
Mm-hmm.
How do you know, like, just before you download what version it needs, or what? How is that determined? Is that determined between the current module that's already downloaded, or?
Yeah, so in this case, I wouldn't be able to use views properly if I didn't also have CTools downloaded and enabled.
It's going to the latest version always? Or
it always does, yeah. So if you had to specify a certain version, if you knew for whatever reason, you can actually say, like, because chances are if you need a certain version, I think you can say Drush N and then type in the version number.
When you download it, you would type Drush DL module name dash,
yeah,
and then 7.x dash 1.2.
Okay.
Yeah. And it'll go to that one specifically, yeah.
Are there any tricks for knowing, like, the machine name for, like, a project that you might want to download and install without
going to Drupal.org? You can do a search of modules, correct? It's the PML,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
PML will just, that'll just tell you for the site that
you're on.
But there is type Drush help, and then it would be, and I turn each and can do Command F, and I think it's what is it? Try module. So I tried. It's like a PM something. Okay.
Oops. Let's see. PM list.
Yeah, I guess basically the question is, like, you know that the module is called something like
the chicken and egg, like, what am I looking for?
Yeah.
Like, machine name something.
There's no way of browsing.
Agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no way of browsing via the command line, really, but I think there's, like, you can type You can type like that info command that was up there,
Mm-hmm.
and get info on like I think it's this one, you know, that I remember.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're asking how to get to it without
asking if you guys
going
have
to Drupal.org? Because it's a directory name of the project on Drupal.org.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Yeah.
And chances are you'll probably know if you, especially when you're doing security updates, you'll probably remember what the machine name is. But yeah. Okay. So that's some of the basic stuff here. So we went through modules. There were a few other additional Drush commands that I've personally found useful, but as Kathleen mentioned, that whole Drush commands website will have any and all sort of stuff that you need. But just to go over this quickly, if you wanted to bring up your watchdog list to see all your sessions and so on, you can just go watchdog show. You can also clean it out using watchdog delete. If you're using backup and migrate, there's these options as well to pull, and there's more from here too. I just took the ones that I've used before. You can take a backup, you can determine the destination, you can also restore, although I would say be very, very careful if you're doing that. And then for users, you can also create, add roles, remove roles, block, and unblock. So these are all things, again, that save you time as opposed to having to go through the UI. So I think that's it from me, unless there's more questions about these basic commands.
Yeah. Got a question. So when you're working on a Pantheon site and you're, say, adding a module, are you adding the files to your local copy, and then you have to still do a git commit? And
yeah, well,
push?
That's what we do, for example, and I think it's probably how most people have things configured. So if I was right now actually wanting this little vanilla site that I've just spun up, if I wanted to actually move it up and start working on it on Pantheon, then yes, I would do, for me personally, I would do a git status and then git push, and I would be all set to go on Pantheon as well. So
if you run the command on Pantheon server,
yeah, and Caroline's about to demo how that works specifically. Yes, yeah.
I'll hold off then.
Are you a plant? Yeah, I know. Okay, let me move here. I need a quick thing. Google Hangout before I pass this over. Let me unplug so you guys don't have to all see this. All right, I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Are you going? I mean, talk about Terminus, and that's the way we can. I mean, do the migration from the because that's the where I start. I have to go through the GUI and do it. So
Caroline will. They are public. I can send. I can
add the link to
the Drupal.org event. Yeah. Okay. Let me unmute my mic.
screen share. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Terminus. Terminus is a command line interface that you can use to interact with Pantheon sites and do pretty much everything you can do on the Pantheon dashboard you can do in Terminus. It's not 100% finished. There are some commands that are don't work exactly how you expect them to. And there's actually two versions of Terminus. Terminus version 1 is a Drush extension, which means you install it like any other Drush extension, you download it to your Drush directory, and it gives you Drush commands. And you may have seen some up there, a Drush p-site, Drush Pantheon site wake, Drush Pantheon site create. So that's been around for a while. But that's kind of been deprecated in favor of this new thing, which is Terminus version 2, which is a complete rewrite from the ground up, as a PHP application. So the commands I'm going to be showing you are on the bleeding edge, the Terminus version 2 command line application. Although everything that I'm doing is something that you can do with the Drush version. So, as with Drush itself, the Pantheon command line application is available on GitHub. I'm not going to go too much into how to install it, but basically you can, here's on the README here, the installation article. You can either run this command to download a FAR file, which is a PHP archive, and then you create a symlink to it, and then it's in your bin, and you can just type Terminus. Or, if you're like me and you want to be on the bleeding edge, you basically are going to clone it, and then you're going to run Composer, and then run the build script. So, again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about exactly what that is, but that's basically what you do. This is the older version, the Terminus V1, which is as I said, a Drush extension. So you can install it using Git and Composer. So any questions about the basics of what they are? All right. So things you can do with Terminus. Basically anything you can do on the dashboard. You can spin up a new site. You can add team members, although that command is not currently working in Terminus v2, but it's on the list. You can deploy code from one environment to another. So if you're working on your dev environment and you have pushed something up locally, then you can use Terminus to deploy that from dev to test. You can also use Terminus to apply dashboard updates. For example, if there's a Drupal core update or a distribution update, it's going to appear on your dashboard, and using Terminus you can apply those dashboard updates. You can clone your content between environments. You can take your live content and clone it down to your dev environment, so when you're doing your new development, you're doing it on absolutely the latest content. You can create and restore backups. You can also, and this is pretty cool, you can use Terminus as a wrapper to run Drush commands on any Pantheon site that you have access to. So what this means is, if you have Terminus, you don't need Drush aliases for any of your Pantheon sites. You can totally ignore the Pantheon aliases file. Whatever, you don't need it. And you don't have to update it when you create a new site. As soon as your site is created, then you can run Drush commands on it. And, of course, much, much more. So here's some sample Terminus commands. You do have to log in order to use Terminus, and the way you log in is this Terminus auth login command, and you use your dashboard email and password to log in. I don't know if they're going to do something with SSH keys or not, but for now, this is how you log in. The next sample command is how to create a backup for your live environment of a particular site. So Terminus has this idea of commands, subcommands, and arguments. So Terminus is how you call the script, site is a command, backup and create are subcommands, and then you pass in these arguments of live for the environment and site for the site name. And here's a more complicated one. The last command is a sample command where you would want, let's say you want to deploy some changes from your dev environment to your test environment. Terminus site deploy, and then env is the destination environment, from is the from environment, cc and update db are flags you pass in to say yes, clear caches, yes, update the database. You can add a deployment note, and then I'm telling it what site name. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this. My normal thing that I say when I start a live demo is, what could possibly go wrong? Nothing, right? So I have two windows open. One thing that happens sometime when you're working with Pantheon, and you'll notice this if you've been using Terminus or the dashboard, is that some operations take time. and sometimes they take longer than you would expect. For example, spinning up a new container takes a couple minutes. Sometimes kicking off a backup, if there are a bunch of stuff queued up and waiting, then your backup won't start for a while and it'll take long. And if you have 500 megabytes of files to back up, that'll take a while. So I have 2 windows open. So what I'm going to do is I am going to kick off some stuff in the yellow window, and then while it's running, I'll do some other examples in the blue window. So the first thing I need to do is log in. Typing in my email address. And I get this lovely artwork, which, of course, in this tiny terminal window, since I've made my text so big, it just breaks up. So now I'm logged into Terminus. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a completely new site. I want to spin up a new container. Oh, sorry, Terminus sites create. Yep, me up. And it's gonna, for this command, it sort of walks you through interactively the information it needs. So human readable name for the site, I'm going to say CB BDUG. Machine name of the site, and it says if left blank it'll be CB BDUG. That's okay with me. Now I can choose to spin this up as part of the UC Berkeley organization or not. If you're building a site for Berkeley, you definitely want it to be in the Berkeley organization, because that means you get the hosting discount and you get whatever. But you could be a member of more than one organization, or you could be working on a personal site and wanting to use Pantheon, whatever. I'm going to choose the UC Berkeley organization. And now I can choose a start state. And these are all the start states you can choose. There are 25 of them, including WordPress. So it's not just Drupal you can do this way. You can work on your Pantheon WordPress sites. So I'm going to choose Panoply as my base distribution. So number 21. And now this is where it's going to take a while to kick off and work. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go over to this window and run. So Terminus is sort of self-documenting, hopefully. And so here are the top-level commands. Art, view Pantheon artwork. Okay, sure. Auth is how you log in and log out. CLI is how you get information about Terminus, like if you want to know what version you're running. Code is how you interact with the site's code, like committing, deploying, etc. Drush is the wrapper for Drush commands. Help is help. Organizations are commands related to organizations that you might be a member of. The account I'm using right now is not a privileged admin account, but if I was logged in as my privileged admin account, then I would be able to do operations on the Berkeley organization. Products are distributions, or so Drupal or WordPress. Site is commands related to an individual site, and sites with an S is commands related to either multiple sites or new sites. And WP is the WordPress equivalent to Drush. So look, pow, I've created a new site. Very nice. So if I go back to my dashboard, I should see it there. Yeah, there it is. So you can see here that, let me see if I can bump this up a little. So you can see that it has the lovely rainbows and unicorns, which means that I haven't actually installed anything yet. So if I go to this site on my dashboard, I will see here's the initial commit, and it's in SFTP mode, which is fine for starting. If I actually clicked Visit Development Site, since I've started with Panoply, it would kick off the install process. But I don't want to sit through and clicky through the install process. So there's a Drush command that I can run that will install Panoply for me. And I have that, helpfully, here. This is the Drush command here. What that does is site install, Panoply distribution, gives its mail, the site name, the account mail, and the account name. So I'm going to copy that and type. Let's just get this idea. So let's go over here. So I have to give it. I give it the Drush command, and the Drush, any flags that you use in Drush are passed through. But I also have to tell it a site and an environment. So I'm going to say, actually do it in this other terminal window. Paste my enormous command equals BDUG and equals okay, so now another problem that comes up here is that you see this error, no site exists with this name. One thing that Pantheon does to try to improve performance is they cache things. So what happens is that the previous state of my sites list has been cached, and so it's not aware of the new site. So now I'm going to try, since I had Drush twice, I'm just going to type this. CBBD dev -- no, and this trips me up. I was going crazy, like, what happened? But okay, now it tells me this is a thing where since I haven't connected to the server before, I have to want to keep continuing to connect, and now it is going to run the Panoply installation process, this Drush command. So you can see here it's telling me running Drush command, It tells me you are about to create this. Yes, go ahead. Starting Drupal installation. So this is just getting Panoply installed. So if you've ever installed Panoply, you know it goes through a few screens. It asks you if you want to install apps. It asks you for your email and your account name and your site email. This basically, with all those flags I tossed in, does the whole thing, except the password. It'll randomize the password. So now that that's running, I'm going to show a few more things with the Terminus commands. So Terminus sites, these are the commands that you use to create, import, delete, and show sites. So let's do Terminus show. So it tells me that I have two sites, one that was my test that I spun up yesterday, and one that, and this one right here, it tells me framework. Someone should tell them that. It's a Drupal site, it's at the service level of free, and it's actually, it should be telling me the UUID, which is yeah, so pay no attention to the whatever behind the curtain, because this is all bleeding edge stuff, but it should show the UUID. And so this is nicely formatted in a way that completely breaks on my narrow window. But Terminus site info gives me, look, they spelled, yeah, this is the site ID. There's also the organization ID and the payment scheme ID, the upstream, which is Panoply Drop 7, all this information. So that's Terminus site info. Okay, so now over in this window, it's done installing Pantheon. Panoply. So if I go to visit development site, you can see that I'm in SFTP mode, and it has created a settings.php for me, which I don't really need on Pantheon. But now if I go to the development URL, it'll wake up, and there's my Panoply site. So now I want to demonstrate a little bit more of the things you can do with Terminus and Drush. So now I'm going to download, enable, and commit a few modules. So on the dashboard here, I'm in SFTP mode. Yes, which means that I can run a Drush DL command directly on Pantheon. I don't have to, none of this is local, this is all on Pantheon. So if I do Terminus DL, let's say I want to do some mapping, PHP field, and then I do CBBD. It runs that command, tells me that it's running it. Hopefully this won't take too long.
So the site and the environment are mandatory. We have to put it to make sure that it knows which one we are using.
Yes, there are some commands that take dev as the default, so if you don't, but that's not very well documented right now, so I would always, if you're running a command on a site, always tell it the site and the environment, otherwise you might do something unexpected to an environment you don't want to. So now I've downloaded the modules. Now I'm going to enable them, and I'm going to demonstrate the -y flag, which means say yes to everything. And it'll enable those two modules, just because I want to do it. And now it's saying yes for me.
So would the download command fail if you were in Git mode?
Yes, it would. You can do a lot of things on Drush in Git mode, anything that's basically reading, but if you are doing a DL or whatever, then you have to be in SFTP mode. Okay, it tells me it was enabled successfully. Now I want to know, okay, what change? Do I have any uncommitted changes in my dev environment? Because if I switch to Git mode without committing them, they'll all just disappear, and that would be bad because the module's enabled, and then you wouldn't find the code, and white screen of death, right? So Terminus site will tell you the uncommitted changes. So then again, I have to say oh yeah, look at all this stuff. And again, since my thing is so big, it tells me every file here. I could parse this list if I wanted to, but oh look, there are all these things. So now I want to commit them using a code command, site, and then I give it the site equals CBBDUG. G. Can add a commit message, which is helpfully called note. To put in a message is called message, but here it's called note. Oh no, wait, sorry. This is actually message, not note. Here. Modules. Okay, so this will give me a confirmation. Yes, it says one change. Really, there's like 100 files changed, so hopefully that'll get fixed. And now it'll start working. Yes, successfully committed. And you can actually see in the background that my dashboard page is refreshing. So it's committed. And now I want to start letting my stakeholders and whatever look at the test site. So I have to create the test environment. I have to push up all my code that I've changed on dev to test, and I also need to clone my content upstream. On the dashboard, if I went to test and I click the button, clone the development environment to create the testing environment, that does two things. It pushes the code and it clones the Debian files because it's the first time. Terminus doesn't actually do that. You have to do two things. You have to first deploy the code and then and then push the content files upstream. So back in my Terminus window here, I'm going to go site destination environment. Now, you can deploy directly from dev to live. Probably you can, but probably you wouldn't want to. Sorry, I need to put this in. Env equals test. Okay, and now here's where I can put in a note. This is to the Pantheon dashboard, is that now there's this list of deployments which are separate from commits, because a deployment might be 15 or 20 commits. So now I'm going to add a note. Okay, and now I need site equals. Does that look good? Okay, let's do it. And this sometimes takes a little bit. It's working, it's working. So let's look at as you can do on individual sites. Attributes and info, I'm not sure why they're different, but you can do a whole bunch of things. Backup, kick off a backup. You can open a link to the dashboard in your browser. You can delete an environment. You can look at custom domain names you have assigned to it, etc. You can see if jobs are pending, all these different things. Wake it up, wipe it, everything. So over here in this window, again, it says woot, which is very nice, that my code is deployed to test. So if I go back to the dashboard just to make sure I'm not crazy, here's the test. There's the commit log in test, and if I go to deploys, here's the note I put in, etc., etc. So the commits are in the commit log, and the deploys are in the deploy log. Does anyone have any questions so far on this stuff? Okay. So the next thing I need to do is, again, if I clicked visit testing site, it would just start the installation process, which I don't want. So this is one of the few times when I want to push the content and files upstream instead of pulling it down because it's brand new. So let's see. Okay.
What do you mean by content?
Database.
Upstream.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by upstream?
Uphill. Sorry, not upstream, but uphill. Generally speaking, if you're developing, you probably want to you'll probably have a workflow, which may go something like, once your site is launched, if you want to add a new function or feature, pull the live content and live database and files down to dev, run any updates, add new code, test it out. So you're always pushing your code uphill and your content downhill, because you don't want to wipe out something that another person has been doing on the live site. Same thing with test. So when you're ready to test it, you would push the code up from dev and pull the database and files down from live, run update PHP, etc., test, and then you push the code up to your live environment, run updates, etc. And always, always, always take a backup if you care about your sanity. Please take a backup. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do something that I only do when the environment is brand new, which is I'm going to push all the database and files uphill. So I'm going to Terminus. And 2n equals dev d. Let's say that's basically a Boolean on-off, yes, no. You have to tell it yes files, yes database, otherwise it won't do anything. You could say just database or just files, and then and are you sure? Sure. And this is another one of those operations that might take a little bit.
Question about the database.
Yes.
If I create my own tables, does it, make a backup of all of those, or
Yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
from the whole database.
Yes, the entire database, anything that's in the database is backed up because it's not done through any Drupal UI. It's just Pantheon stuff. So look, it's telling me what it's doing. Very nice. Okay, so it has successfully cloned. And now if I'm in test and I click visit testing site, again, live demo. Yes, it worked. And now I can turn all my stakeholders loose on it and say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. Isn't it cool? And eventually they're going to say, yes, we want to make it go live, and then you would basically repeat the process and push it live. If you're running a Pantheon site and you have a paid site, then you can schedule automated backups. But in order for the backups to run, this backup schedule to run, you have to be in Git mode. So I need to switch to Git mode. So I can do that from Terminus. Terminus. Mode. Again, I think you can have different connection modes for different environments, but that's like totally like advanced stuff. Please don't mess with it. Help, eek. So I'm just going to say env equals dev. To Git and site equals. So this will set the connection mode. I've already committed everything, so it's not going to throw everything away. And for some reason, it gives you this output when you change the connection mode. Not sure why. But now if I go back to the dashboard, to dev, you can see that I'm in Git mode. And if this were a paid site, I could then go to the backups tab and set a schedule. But I have to be on a paid plan to do that. I can still kick off a manual backup, which is the last thing I want to do. I want to back up my test environment. So Terminus equals. That will kick off a backup, something that occasionally takes a while, given however busy Pantheon might be. So that is, go back to my slide here. Oh look, that was my live demo. So using only the command line, we have created a new site, we've put it in the Berkeley organization, we've started with the distribution, we could have picked vanilla Drupal of any flavor. We've added a module, committed the code, deployed it to the test site, switched to Git mode, and kicked off a backup. And that is sort of like a beginning to end workflow of how you might create a site on Pantheon with Terminus. Does anyone have any questions on this part so far?
I wanted to note too that sometimes these Terminus commands seem kind of long, and you're like, why am I typing all this? You can create aliases for them in your local
shell, yeah.
And then you can just, for me, if I update my local site, one of the modules, then I want to push it up, and I use Terminus in order to then deploy it from dev test to live. Instead of saying p-site deploy, I just say TDP, and it's done. So once you sort of get the hang of it, you can then make it a little easier for yourself, so you're not typing a billion lines.
Yes, I definitely wanted to type all the lines so that you could see them, but I'm the kind of person who would make a bunch of aliases for this. So any questions about Terminus?
Just a general overall thing, the reason to use Terminus and Drush is if you're handling many sites, it sort of makes it's an efficiency tool. All of those things.
It is, but it's also I am keyboard oriented, and I don't like to click around and wait, So if I can just type one command, kick it off, and let it go, I'm going to do that. One thing that is not going to be an issue for everybody, but it might be for some of you, is that this requires this goes over SSH. So you actually need to be able to SSH out and reach the Pantheon servers. So if you're behind a firewall or something, unfortunately, you won't be able to do this stuff with Drush, you'll have to use the web interface. All right. So now I'm going to stop my. Okay, and I'm going to go back to this and stop screen sharing and turn off my mic.
Demonstrating, can take under a minute, and you sometimes haven't even loaded cycle modules page on in your UI. So that's where, again, if you're just doing site building and somebody else is maintaining your site, this might not necessarily apply to you. But if you're the person that has to apply updates every time there's a security update, this would really help. And so when you practice Drush, we highly recommend start by practicing locally, and then practice in a sandbox site on Pantheon first. And then if you have a paid Pantheon site, as Caroline mentioned, you can enable at least daily backups, but then when you start, it doesn't hurt to back up any environment you care about first, particularly if you have a production site, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally patch the wrong switch and then production site and
Cool. Yeah. Am I coming through?
Yep.
Okay. So in typical fashion, I created a huge amount of slides, and I've barely run through anything. So there will be some useful stuff at the beginning, but we might get a little bit freeform as we go on. And so in this section, I wanted to talk about actually automating stuff using these commands. So going, operating on more than one site and running more than one command at once. And so my contrived use cases are you have a coworker who has admin rights to your 10 sites, and all of a sudden she walks off the job. And your boss says, can you make sure that she doesn't mess up any of our websites? So one way we can do that is by by using these techniques that are coming up. Another possible use case is you are doing, like your boss says, this is very contrived, okay, I want the site name of all of our sites to start with UC Berkeley and then whatever site name we've set. Okay, so those are the first two things we'll go through. Let's see. So I have thrown a bunch of stuff into a GitHub repository. There's not a whole lot, but if you're interested in any of the code that I'm using here, and there's also a template that I'll be showing you later for a way that we've been liking to organize our PHP scripts. So the first thing we'll deal with is the employee who needs to be blocked from our sites. And so the easiest way to run a command on multiple sites is to use what's called a Drush site list. And so on the left side of this table, we have regular Drush aliases that we might find in our aliases DrushRC PHP. So we've got two sites there. One's called EBCP567, and the other is called software. And then on the right side, we have a site list, a Drush site list, that contains both of these aliases. So basically, Drush site list is just an alias of other Drush aliases. And so these are two different files that sit in my .drush directory. My aliases file is called local.aliases, but I think in what Kathleen was showing you before, it was just aliases drushrc.php. If you've got local or whatever word in front of aliases, then you have to address your aliases like at local.sitename or at foobar.sitename. And then my alias for this group is called test BDUG. So that's what that looks like. So let's do a couple of quick tests on our site list to make sure it works. So the first thing we will do, bear with me a second, let's get this bigger for you guys. And that's not the right one, it's that one. And F. It's amazing how hard it is to remember keystrokes sometimes when you're presenting. Okay. A little better now. Can you see that basically? Okay, so our commands are right here, and basically we just want to first run a simple command to make sure that our site list is working. Drush at test BDUG. And it was vget site name, right? So vget is the short command for variable get. So we're just printing out the value of a Drush variable. And anytime you're operating on a site list, it's going to be like, are you sure you want to run these commands on multiple sites? You can turn that off with the -y switch. And then you'll see your stuff come back with prepended information about what site it came from. So local.software told me my site name is Software Central, and EBCP told me my site name is Executive Vice Chancellor. Okay, so our site list is working. The next thing we want to do is be like, okay, we've heard there's a problem with this guy Bwood at berkeley.edu. So let's see what let's get some information about his account. I can't cut and paste out of here. So oh no, I can cut and paste out of here. Cool. Let's save the typing. And so we are asking 2 sites, and could be 20 sites. You know, tell me about this account. And so for local.software, the interesting thing is he has 2 roles, authenticated user and administrator. Same thing here. And so we're a little bit, so administrator, he can do basically anything to this site. So the first thing we're going to want to do is block this guy so that he can't go just you know, remove the database or something drastic. So to do that, we will run user block, and user block, you can specify the UID in the Drupal database. If you know it, in this case, I know the guy's email address, and that's going to be unique, so that's another thing I can add. And what we should get here, actually I forget, we don't get any output, but we can go back to our user information command and see what the status of this account is now. And the interesting thing is that the user status is blocked on both sites. So we've very quickly been like, okay, cool, this guy's locked out. Although if the guy has Drush access to the site, he can break right back in. The interesting thing about this is ULI is short for user login. It's the long version of the Drush command. You can't run that on a site list. When you do, you just get like no site or something. It needs to be run on an individual site. And bear with me here. So let's break back into the software site. Copy, paste, put an I on the end of that. And so this is going to log me in as user 1 on this site and allow me to go change the password for user 1. So basically, I have access to anything now. But if we go back to the Executive Vice Chancellor site, I'm logged in from before as Brian Wood, and so if I just try to go to, say, some admin page, I see now that my access is denied because I was blocked. So so that's a quick demonstration of using site lists to operate on multiple sites. Any questions?
Are they Drush commands, or did you wrote some scripts that does that?
These are Drush commands, and basically, if I type Drush help, basically I get all my Drush commands, and I was using the user block command, and so if I search for that's from the audit module. User block is right there, and so that's a built-in Drush command that I use to block the user. All of that was straight up Drush.
So if you wanted to prevent that ULI, you would have to block their SSHP access if it was a remote site.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a great point. So there's also on Pantheon, there are roles within our organization. So we would want to make sure that user's role was de-escalated or just removed whatever from our organization, so that he couldn't just go download the Drush aliases and get right back in.
And that could be scripted with Terminus.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't even looked into that part of the new Terminus. So that's running one command on multiple sites. So now let's talk about running multiple commands using a Drush script. There's actually two ways using Drush to run commands. There's Drush PHP eval and Drush PHP script. PHP eval is really for running one command, but if you know anything about the shell, and you can easily nest commands, and you can create multiple. You can put a semicolon at the end of one PHP command, and add another one, or use a ampersand, whatever. But when you start getting into longer commands, using PHP script gets more convenient, because you can actually write a separate script file, which this command takes as an argument, and execute it. And in both cases, the PHP that you're running on your site runs after Drupal has bootstrapped the site. So that's important, because and powerful, because it means that you have access to the entire Drupal API. So you could actually use Drupal form submit and pass it like a long form state array, and tell it to submit a form that exists on that site programmatically. You could do pretty much anything that you can program in Drupal using the Drupal API. Also, if you hadn't bootstrapped the Drupal site and you wanted to get the value of the site name variable, well, nothing knows that value, because the site hasn't, it's not running. So next, our evil boss says, I want to change the name of all of our sites so it's prepended with UC Berkeley, because that's going to make us look really official. So So looking at using a Drush script, this is pretty simple. You can create a script called prepend. I called it prepend UCB, and it just has 2 lines. And basically, the first takes the value of the current site name, and these empty quotes here are an argument to the Drush API function variable get. It just wants to know what is the default value I should use if I can't find the site. So I'm saying use nothing. And then it uses variable set to change the value of the variable site name to be UC Berkeley : and then the dot concatenates the value of the name variable onto it. So we can run this whole thing with PHP script prepend. Let's see, that in my history. Drush PHP script prepend UCB PHP. I'm gonna give the -y switch because I'm really confident about what I'm doing and I don't need it to ask me yes or no. And so normally you would get some different output that I'll talk about why those dashes are appearing. Basically, let's see what happened on our sites. If we go to the EVCP site and just go back to the home page, and we may need to clear caches, or it may not have worked because it's a demo. And I think I might know why. This one worked. Let's see. And you guys will trust me on that one, right? Oh, let's see, that's the Pantheon version, that's the local version. So anyways, I'll ask you to trust me on the second one. If we take a look at the script we just ran, I'll pull it up here. Bear with me. When I hit the right key, it will get bigger. So the -- is that that PHP comment there, commenting out the PHP declaration at the beginning of the file. When you're running when you're using a Drush script, the PHP is kind of optional. It should work with either, and I'll show you the reason I have it commented out is because let's see. It's because of one of the next things I'm going to show you. First, just a quick note to say that we don't need a Drush script to do exactly what we did. This could be done with PHP eval, and the command would look like this. We've got Drush add alias name, PHP eval, and in this case, excuse the backslash here, it was like not fitting all the way on here. So the backslash just means tells the shell to not worry about the fact that there's a return there. So variable set site name UC Berkeley, and then I'm nesting variable get site name in there as the value. So I'm just and actually it looks like there is a small syntax error in that example. There should be a dot to say concatenate that. Whoa. Anyways, just to make the point that PHP eval is great for simple commands, and then if you the pain of it is that you have to worry about quoting in your shell, and if you need quotes in your PHP command, then you might need to escape them, et cetera, et cetera. So it gets a little cumbersome, and it's not good for more than a few commands. So this is where things get a little interesting, especially related to Pantheon. So a Drush script needs to exist on the file system where the site lives. So that makes using an actual Drush script kind of inconvenient on Pantheon, because you could go into SFTP mode and figure out some directory to upload your script to, and then run the Drush PHP or Drush script command, specifying the path to wherever the script lives, and it should work. I haven't tried that for quite a while. I'm not sure if I've ever tried that. here's a trick to completely get around it. So by using I/O redirection or input-output redirection in the shell, we can send the contents of the file prepend UCB PHP to the standard input of the command drush Pantheon blah 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 PHP script. So this dash at the end says, and this is in the Drush help for PHP script, it says take input from standard input. Are people familiar with standard input and standard output there? Okay. So let's take a look at what would happen if we didn't know that and we just tried to we said, oh, we've got our script, you know, right in this directory. Here's my prepend UCB PHP, so why can't I just run drush at Pantheon ebcp blah PHP script prepend UCB PHP? Well, if I do that, drush should tell me, you know, I'm unable to find prepend UCB PHP in any of the locations that I know to look for it in. So let's see what happens if I use the trick here and cat it into standard input. So cat pipe, and then we need a dash on the end to say take what you're getting. So the pipe symbol means, you know, I'm piping data into this next command, and the dash on the end says I'm taking that data that I got in this command and using it as standard input. And I get no nothing back, but often in this environment that is a good thing. That means you there was success. So if we go take a look at the Pantheon version of the site right now, it said the title is Executive Vice Chancellor, but if we go to some other page, we now see that it's changed to UC Berkeley, Executive Vice Chancellor. So so this is an oh, and so I was talking about the dash dash. So when you do that cat into, you can't have the PHP declaration. What do they call it technically? I forget. It's not the shebang in bash. It would be the shebang, but it's the declaration that this is a PHP file. That'll. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. So that'll foul up the command. So just a little gotcha in case you guys try this. So then we can take this concept and get a little more complex with it. So let's say you have a longer script and you need to, as one of your steps in the script, you want to do exactly what I just described. It's totally possible, and I do this a lot, to have your script write out a Drush script to some temporary directory, and then have the Drush script, and then have it catted into standard input using an exec command, and everything will go merrily along. And so this is how I did it in one case. This function, so I'll create these script functions, and I'll call it script and then something descriptive, and then I can even manipulate what's in the script that I'm automatically creating by passing variables in. And the script that I'll start to create, you have to keep in mind when you're doing this that you don't want to evaluate any variable because you're basically using PHP to create other PHP code. So so that's why the $sign is / escaped here. And then you can see I've got my severity and my start time are being passed in to what is a DB query call here using the Drupal API. And then often when I do this, I'll use what PHP, since PHP 5.3, you can use what's called a now doc, which you may have seen here docs before, which is just a way of like sort of creating a long string variable with returns in it. If you single quote whatever string you're using to terminate that variable, so that single quotes around EOT, whoops, don't go forward. It will automatically single quote everything that you're creating. So I don't need to worry about / escaping these $signs or anything else that might be evaluated by PHP. So the script I'm creating basically is going to do this database query, and then it's going to loop over the query and output some information. For anyone who's sharp in here, you might be like, well, can't you just use Drush SQL query to run an arbitrary query on your site? Yes, you totally can. And the only reason that I'm going to this length with this is that I'm getting stuff out of the watchdog table, and I need to unserialize some data that comes back from the database in order to print out something useful to the user. And you know, you could use Drush SQLQ and probably figure out a way to get stuff unserialized, but it was much more convenient for me just to do it this way. So basically, the variable script file will contain the contents of my script, and it's going to write. Let's see. Oh no, the script file is going to contain the path to the script. So it stashes it in clone path, which in the script is like, for me, it's like /temp. And then I'm naming it using the defined variable function, which is whatever the name of my function is. So that makes this code nice and reusable. You can just cut and paste it between other functions. Whatever your function's name is going to create a script called that. And then I just use fopen to write the script out, and then close my file handler. And then the last thing I do in my function is I return the path to the file. And then I'll show you how I actually call that. If PHP Storm keeps doing this thing to me where it seems to close things when I don't want it to close things. So this happens in step 22 of our migration script. If I go back into presentation mode, basically this step, and I'll talk a little bit more about these step-based scripts. If I'll try and squeeze it in here in the last 5 minutes or so. Basically what's happening in this step is it's telling the user, you should link check the site at this point, and after the link checker crawls every page of this site, I want to check watchdog. I want to check the Drupal syslog, basically, to see did any of these errors that I know sometimes happen. And if so, then I want to tell the user, do these other things to clear up these errors. And so basically the interesting part for what we just looked at is down here where we've got script watchdog messages. I'll just actually, we're actually starting up, here's where I set my severity. Here's where I get the path to the script. So I'm calling script watchdog messages, and I am getting back here the path to the script. And then I'm creating a command, and I take an extra step here just to be, and so I'm catting that script into Drush. Drush is figuring out the alias that I want to execute this on, and then here's my PHP script, or SCR for short, with the dash on the end of it. And then it just goes on its way and spits out the output, and I do a little parsing of the output to help the user. So I think I can demonstrate this to you to sort of bring it home. Let me try and nope. Here. Nope. Okay, up here. Keep hitting the wrong thing. Come on, come forward. Okay. Okay, so I'm running that step 22. That's what my -s22 means on a site, and basically this shows a couple different conveniences that we use in our scripting. The first thing it's doing is it's saying, you know, a lot of us have Integrity, which is a free link checker app on the App Store, and it's saying, do you want to open that up? And if I say yes, it actually opens that application. I do that just with the open command, which is available in Unix and Mac OS. And then I say, okay, you're doing your link check. Type yes when the link checker is done, and we'll look at the database log. So I hit yes, and it tells me, you know, I see that you started your link checker around here, so I'm going to be looking for errors that occur after that. And then it's, because of how this is set up, it looks for them just in a very small time. I haven't run the link checker, so it didn't find anything. But then it gives you this option, you know, do you want to look at everything in Watchdog? And so you can, I think, yeah. So this is kind of what the user would see, like this is what that script spits out. So that script it sits on our local hard drive, but it got automatically created, and then we sort of tricked the Pantheon server into taking that input and evaluating it and spitting out this information back on our local computer. So let's see. So we're just about out of time. The one thing that I'll say, I don't know if somebody has the room after us, but the one thing I'll just point you guys at, in case you're interested, is let's see if I can pull up in the there's this template in one of my GitHub repositories that creates that I use to start scripts that are going to be long. And probably the single most helpful thing has been, we've got these 22-step scripts that help us migrate like the Executive Vice Chancellor's site from an old version of what we call Open Berkeley to a newer version of Open Berkeley. And that creates step 23. I need a way to be able to quickly, like, just write step 23 and run just step 23. And so this script uses getops, and it allows you to specify all these command line switches. It's called migrateob.php, and at a basic level, you can just list out all of your steps. And then what I did with that last command was I used -s22, and that says run just step 22. There's also a -b switch that will say begin at step 16, and there's an e switch that will say don't go past step 19. You know, and that's also useful because when you start getting into this kind of automation, you think as a programmer, oh, I've like created this great 22 long step script that Caroline can run it and it'll do everything she needs, and she'll be in a situation where she'll be like, well, I actually don't need steps 1 through 5 and I don't need step 9, but I need everything else. And so using this template allows her a lot of flexibility. So I'll leave it at that, and if anyone has questions, we can definitely take them.
So again, this covered the whole spectrum. So if you're just starting out, don't be intimidated by the stuff Brian's doing. If you ever visit admin modules, Drush will help you, and you can start with the basic commands and whatever. But as you start using it, you'll just start finding more and more things that you wish that you could do, and then that's where you kind of progress through Terminus, and eventually you start creating those scripts. Any questions? Otherwise,
I have a question, not regarding this.
I'm just wondering, how do you update the version
of Drush?
Yeah.
So in the beginning, you might have missed the beginning where I just pointed you. If you go to the GitHub Drush page, if you git clone, you can just literally pull the next update. So that's what we do. So if we just git clone whatever version of Drush you want, and then regularly you just go pull if you set it up as upstream, you would call it upstream master, and then update it just later. Get code. Otherwise, if you've just downloaded that zip file, you can just, if you know there's a new version, just download the new version right over your old version.
There's an internal self-update command also.
It depends on how you set up Drush, yeah. So that, all of that will be on that install page, I'm sure.
I'm trying to develop, you know, a site for a study I brought from my department, and the way we want to have like classification. You go first country, then to the city, then you go to the university, what courses they have. So I want to have that ability. I don't know which module I can use. You know, through using the hierarchy. I mean, the tags that just go one level down. I mean, it can list them based on, for example, the tag you have. I don't have that level of classification. Do you know any module I can use?
Not off the top of our head. I mean, that's a pretty specific use case right now.
Yeah. If you know any module I can help you, I can send you an email.
Yeah, I don't think, does anyone off the top of their head, I don't think, like I said, those are, you know, when it comes to a specific use case that you're trying to do, you know, that's where you have to get creative in terms of, you can certainly feel free to post to some of the communities, and sometimes people will get
No,
an
I thought
answer.
maybe you had some experience with that.
Any other questions regarding this session? All right, thanks for your time. And you can visit the groups.drupal.org/Berkeley page. There are links to both this recording, hopefully recorded, and our slides. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right.